Welcome back to the show. Today we're asking a massive question. Welcome to Heartbreak to Wholeness, the podcast helping you heal from the mindfuck of narcissistic relationships and move towards the secure, peaceful woman you want to become. We will explore all of the tools that you need to get through your grief, to move past those I'll be alone forever fears, and rebuild your confidence so you can move forward in healthy relationships as your full self, never to get sucked into the narcissistic spell again. I am your host, Brie Walta, relationship clarity coach and EFT certified practitioner. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Taj. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to elaborate a little bit on that. Thank you, because I know that coming into a podcast where you're being asked to share your story with who knows how many people will be listening can cause a little bit of nervousness, and just might be the first time that it's done on more of a public level. So I want to thank you for being willing to share, because a lot of what we talked about in the pre-interview, I was like, oh my God, women need to hear this. Like, they can relate. I'm sure listeners can relate on so many levels to what you've gone through, and seeing where you are now is so empowering.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Yeah. So give us a little overview of where it feels good to start about your story of being in the toxic, dysfunctional relationship, whatever label you like to use for that. And what did it feel like when you were really in it, when it was really feeling really hard?
It felt like I just kept thinking there's got to be a way to make this better. There's got to, trying to fix it always. There's got to be what can I do? What can I communicate? I would listen to podcasts about communication and relationships, and I was constantly thinking, what can I do better? I was trying to communicate, and I always thought if I could just communicate things in a way that, my partner could understand it or could get it. Like maybe he's just not understanding. We're different people and everybody understands things different and we don't all think the same. And I was constantly excusing behavior, and I was constantly excusing his just kind of refusal to work on things. And in the really hard times, I just remember thinking, like, is there any way that this could be a good relationship at some point for both of us, something we both enjoy and both want to be in, and one that the kind where you're just really happy and you give each other life, or because it was not that. And I don't think it was ever that. It took me a long time to realize it.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I had a lot of self-criticism, but then I was criticized. He would mirror all the criticism and was constantly telling me and reinforcing, like, yeah, you really are not a great person. Yeah, you really do have all these things you need to work on. And he was always saying, if you would just do, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then you would be a really great person. You have so much potential to be this really great person. And that never sat well with me, but I just thought, I am slowly building up my self-esteem and my self-worth in the middle of something where somebody's constantly attacking that. It's like I would have these moments of clarity where I could understand he is always attacking my self-worth. Yes. And I am trying to build it up, and I can do it without him. I don't need him to build my worth for me. But it was a long process for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can relate so deeply to that desire to just think that you just haven't found the answer yet. And right. You, meaning us, right? As the women, or as the woman who's the person, rather, the person that's in the receiving side of these types of relationships. We're like, oh, I just need to do more therapy. I just need to use different words. I just need to have a better formula to set a boundary, right? And we think, which those are all good tools to have, but we think that we can have the solution when a communication problem needs to be addressed by both sides. It needs to take both people putting in effort and work to be able to shift that. But I got very stuck there too in my past relationship, where I was just like spinning all of the time. What can I do? What am I not doing right? How can I do this differently? Doing therapy for the both of us. It was so much energy and so exhausting.
It is, that is a great point. It is so much energy to constantly be at a very common story where I was mom and caregiver to, I have a son with, my oldest son has special needs and I have a younger son. I was in charge of the house. I was in charge of the finances. I was in charge of doctor's appointments. And with a special needs child, there are, I mean, we might do 12, 15, 20 doctor appointments in a year and communicating with them. And it's different than a typically functioning child who is relatively good health. You might have a couple of doctor's appointments a year, you know, a checkup, maybe a sick visit. I was doing all of this and I felt like I was not doing any of it well because I was stretched in every way and I wasn't getting enough sleep and I didn't have the connection with friends and I didn't have the connection with the outside world and I didn't have the connection with myself is the main thing because in order to stay in that relationship, I had slowly and I had cut off all the avenues to self that I already had. And I think it took me a long time to realize that I was in a marriage with a narcissist. One, I didn't know what it was for a long time. And the first time I heard the term, he was calling me a narcissist.
Mhm.
And I thought, what does that even mean? Am I?
Yes.
I don't think I am, but maybe let me look it up. And so I looked it up and I'm like, well, okay, well, I sometimes I do this. Does that mean I'm a narcissist? Oh my God. And then the more I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, he does a lot of these things. And does he realize it? And I still like couldn't really comprehend it. It was much, much later and friends kind of slowly, like people, not just friends, but people who I trusted who have had experience with narcissistic relationships and abusive relationships would chime in and they would use this term. And then when I started therapy after we had decided to get divorced, and I found them a great therapist for myself. It's just like the therapist I'd been looking for. And she's very quickly, very soon on, started using the term narcissist. And I didn't yet. I still wasn't even comfortable completely labeling it like that.
Yeah.
And it took even longer for me to realize that my relationship with my dad growing up he was a narcissist, a different version
Yeah.
than my ex. When I first started dating my ex, I felt there was I thought I kept thinking there's this relationship feels like no other relationship. But when I look back, I'm like, it was tumultuous from the start.
Yeah.
Why did I not bail? Why did I not go, this is bad? And my friends were going, this is not good. I don't like this. And but there was that familiarity. You know, my therapist put it. I asked her, I was like, you know, I was in a very early on, I was crying, and why did I choose a man that's so similar to my dad? I tried so hard to go the opposite direction. And she said, well, you know, it's not about the surface things, right? It's not about do they say this or do this exactly. It's do they make you feel the
Yeah.
same way? And so yeah, I felt the same way. I felt in my marriage, I felt abandoned, which was my childhood wound.
Yep.
And here I was trying to complete it and I didn't have anything else to any other tools to help me for such a long time. It just felt like I was swimming and treading water and treading water. And then I would float a little bit.
Yep.
And then I would tread water and I didn't. And the person that was supposed to be throwing, you know, your partner would hopefully be able to throw you a life raft, say, hey, let's get you some help if you're really hurting that hard, that much, you know. And the person that was supposed to be helping was just, you know, splashing water in my face the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the trying to get the realizing what situation you're in when you're in it is so difficult
Yeah.
if you don't have anybody else helping you. And sometimes you do, but you can't see it. My friends told me and I couldn't see it,
Well, it
you know?
takes a willingness to hear it, right? It takes, I know for in my experience too, it was like, well, what does it mean about me if he is a narcissist? What does that mean about my ability to pick men or who I am or my wounding? But to your point, it was familiar, right? The ways that they acted towards you or us feels familiar on some level to something that we had in childhood that was
Mhm.
dysfunctional, but it's familiar. And we
Mhm.
always lean towards familiar because it takes less energy in our brain to recognize what's happening, right? Or
Yeah.
to be in that situation. We sort of know how to dance in that dysfunction. We know how to be in relationships where we're talked down to or disrespected or where we don't have to have needs because we can just take care of them.
Right.
It's easier on some levels
And it
because
triggers our coping mechanisms, which is
yeah,
already what we're doing anyway. So it all, yeah, it's a very familiar, easy cycle to be in, even though it's not easy to endure.
yeah,
It's easy to be in. And I didn't recognize it took physical abuse in my relationship for me to realize and start looking back, oh, I've been emotionally and mentally abused
yeah,
this whole time. And I could, and then what exactly what you said, what does that mean about me? And I felt like that made me so weak. And I used to help out at a women's shelter. And so I kind of I knew about cycles and I knew a little bit, I knew about how typically women feel like that, or not always women, but I still, it's different when you have to go through it and you're feeling it. And it took the pphysical abuse for me to go, oh, this is emotional and mental abuse too. And that is so deep seated. And, um, and yeah, and I was, emotionally abused as a child.
yeah.
And I watched my mom be mm, talked down to and disregarded and treated like she was less than, and my whole life as my whole childhood. And so it was like these moments of realizations, and it's exactly what you said. I couldn't see it because I could not see it and survive, is what I thought. I was pretty sure, even I think from the beginning, that I was being cheated on, but
Yeah.
I just could not look at it. And I remember well after my son with special needs was born, and that was a whole different dynamic of care, like the intense caregiving and learning, and then grieving the expectation of, oh, I had the expectation as a pregnant mom that my child would have this life, just little, not specifics, not growing up to be a gymnast or a singer or something, but that he would, go through the typical milestones of crawling and walking and, thumb sucking and or whatever. I had to grieve that and be a mom and be a wife and somehow do all of this, and I was juggling all of this. And I knew there were so many times where I thought, this doesn't sound right. I should maybe look into this. I should maybe go through a phone. And I thought, no, I don't even want to know. I just don't even want to know. And and now when I look back, I'm like, oh, I couldn't have taken that, because that would have been a deal breaker and I would have had to leave. And I didn't feel like I could leave. I didn't feel like I could support my kids on my own and even though I was doing a large percentage of all of it myself already.
Yeah.
I could not understand the balance. When you leave a toxic relationship, you have so much relief.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that would relieving yourself of this toxic, heavy, damaging relationship and that presence in your life. It balance, it's, you think it's going to be, oh, I'm going to be so weighed down with responsibility, but it's like, oh, look at all this buoyancy I have. I'm floating to the top. And for my case, I'm like, oh, look at all this extra money I have. Once I cut him off, I'm like, oh, awesome. I'm
Yeah.
actually doing way better than I thought. And started to see like videos on social media before we decided to divorce and split. And I kept seeing women saying, I got rid of my man child and now it's actually so much better. Yes, it's hard being a single parent. It's hard being a parent, period. And now I don't have that extra draining, leaching,
Yeah.
energy. And I did not know to account for that when I thought all the I don't think I can. I had no idea all the cans that come up with just leaving that person, and how empowering you feel knowing that you're making a decision that's better for you.
Oh my gosh, that is such an important point because when you are in it and you're being sucked on every level, energetically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all of the things, we can only think about the other side that it's going to feel the same way, but we're just going to be alone. But
Yeah.
really what happens to your point is if our cup has been leaking, if it just has holes in it in every direction from this person, all of a sudden we're plugging all those holes so that we can actually refill our cup. And
Hmm.
as we refill our cup, then everything we become more capable of all of the other things
Yeah.
because we're not worried about creating another fight. We're not worried about looking through a phone. We're not worried about are we actually worthy in this relationship? Like there's less things demanding our energy. And the relief is is like nothing that I had ever experienced either. Where I remember waking up and like before I had even opened my eyes, I almost had that gut feeling like, "Oh my God, how is today gonna be?" And then I realized that he didn't live with me anymore and we weren't in the relationship anymore. And I was like, I think it was the first time that my body actually could relax into the bed. It
Mm,
was it was such a it was like I was no longer in the nightmare.
yeah. Yeah. The physicality of being in a toxic relationship. I've been learning. I know people are learning this or talking about this more, but the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic in your nervous system,
Yep.
and the sympathetic being the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and the parasympathetic being the rest and restore. And I am still, I mean, I'm years out of being in that relationship or I mean, I still co-parent, but I guess a little over 2 years since he moved out or something like that. I can't, I don't know. But when I started, I felt that relief. I felt like, oh, this is my space and I get to reclaim it. But it is taking a lot of work. I'm still working on teaching my body to be in the parasympathetic most of the time instead of default sympathetic. And
Yep.
there are times when I'm feeling really great. And then there's something that I realize, oh, I am in the sympathetic. I'm in that like adrenaline, like, woo, kind of go, go, go. And it feels good to me because I like being productive and I like doing things and I like being active in all kinds of ways. But my body is like, can you just take a nap? Can you just,
Yes.
like I have years of being in the sympathetic, not just because of my relationship, but that I think very early on, I was on guard, even though it took a long time before the physical abuse happened. I my body knew that this is not safe. There's parts of me that knew this was not safe, a safe place for me, but I didn't know to listen to those parts.
Yeah.
and and I think that just the physical toll it takes on your body, even if it's not a physically abusive relationship, it takes a toll. And I have a really good friend was in an abusive marriage for 20 something years. And we talk about that. Like you can't just switch from 20 years of being in a sympathetic mode all the time
Yeah.
to parasympathetic. It takes intention and it takes practice. You just practice it.
Yeah.
And I was going to say I was also in that because I have a son with special needs. He has seizures, and there was a lot of switching into that rescue mode with him he's 12 now. So for 12 years, there's also been a lot of, emergency calls and that where my body had a hard time. So
Yeah.
there is a lot to be said for rest and restore, not just self-care, but self-care that takes you into the restore. And
Yes.
I think lazy is the worst word ever. And it's such a critical word about anytime anyone's trying to be in the rest and restore, like just let yourself nap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Let
let
yourself.
yourself soak in the tub if that's what you want to do, or just lay on the floor with your dogs. Whatever it is, if it's restful and it feels good to your body, it's healing.
Yes. Yeah. That non-doing, right? We have to reprogram because that's part of the safety, that's part of the hypervigilance, that's part of the being on guard is like we can never drop our body or our mind or our eyes or anything because we have to be aware of what's happening.
Yes.
And I use a tool called EFT tapping with my clients to do exactly that, to help reprogram the nervous system and help them feel, if even for an hour in our session, what it feels like to feel safe in your body. Because the more that we can come back into that place of, okay, there's safety here, there's safety here, there's no longer the tiger running at me.
Yeah.
That's how we start to subtly shift our default. We're just creating a new set point. We got put into a very high stress situation and just lived there. Like we never came out of the sympathetic. And so the sympathetic is great when you need to get away from danger, but if you're just living in danger, then
Yeah.
it's the stress hormones, everything, it's creating so much chaos internally as well as the chaos in our external. So we have to take some really intentional effort to bring that back down to neutral.
Yes. I love the EFT tapping. I do it just I find videos,
Yeah.
and sometimes I just do it when I feel overwhelmed or feel I can tell I have a feeling that's just I can't I can't seem to stop the spiraling or whatever. And I'm just like, let's just tap a little bit and then we can work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. For the listeners who aren't sure what EFT tapping is, it's a somatic modality where we are actually activating different acupressure points on our face and our torso and our hands while we're feeling a trigger or while we're in some sort of emotional distress. And the activation of those acupressure points helps to regulate the nervous system. And when we are more regulated, then we can become more curious about what we're feeling. And then we can find compassion for what we're feeling. So it really is sort of that gateway to being able to actually integrate feelings instead of staying on the surface, like running away from them. Yeah.
Yes. The kind of therapy that I started doing is, it's primarily the internal family systems, so IFS. A lot of people just call it parts therapy. Most of the time I call it parts therapy, but my therapist, we do somatic practices first. I don't do the tapping with her necessarily, but we do, it's breath, it's focus on breath in one way or the other. We do different breathing exercises. And one I've recently learned about is, I don't know if you know the author, oh, what's her name? It's Dr. Becky, and her book is Good Inside. And she does a lot about parenting, but there's a lot of this somatic that it's just first you've got to kind of get in your body. And she always talks about modeling for your kids. Okay, when they're having a hard time, I'm going to take a few deep breaths. And in her book, she calls them hot cocoa breaths, which is, it's great for children, but it's perfect for me too. And the idea is that you breathe in your nose, like you're smelling the nice fragrance of hot cocoa. And then when you exhale, you blow out and you blow like you're blowing the hot cocoa to cool it off, but you're not blowing the marshmallows off. So you can't blow too fast. So
Ah,
you have that nice controlled breath. So I try to use that with my kids, but I also sometimes I just think, man, I need a hot cocoa breath right now. And I like it because that I can picture the hot cocoa, I can smell it, and then which also helps when you're doing the five senses, when you're
yep.
thinking and hearing and smelling and
Yeah.
in your mind, it's working in your body to calm things down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another tactic to find safety,
Mhm.
to be able to recognize where you are in the moment instead of where your brain is kind of taking you in the threat places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in the IFS therapy, there's like this kind of a spiritual component, and it can, be whatever. You don't have to use any kind of specific spiritual terminology. So for me, I like the terminology of source energy, or like my true self.
Yep.
And it's more and more I'm learning to, if I can live out of my true self, then my true self has capacity
Yeah.
and compassion and creativity and joyfulness and playfulness and peace and quiet and stillness, or
Yep.
silly, all these things that feel really good, freedom.
Hmm.
And so when I do fast therapy, I kind of call my true self in, and it's always here. It's just you forget when you're working out of a scary part, or you realize, man, my mind is spiraling.
Yeah.
And in the parts therapy world, that's just a protector that's trying to tell stories to
Yes.
keep you safe. And it's like that protector is maybe a part of you that's six. If you've ever listened to a 6-year-old, they do tell quite a lot of stories, and they can be spinning around, and there's doesn't have to be any logic to them. And when you have a conflict in a relationship, and then you've got this little voice that's going round and round, and maybe it's telling you the same story 10 times. And it's just like, okay, to recognize, like, okay, this part, you're trying to protect me because you don't want me to feel whatever the underlying feeling is. But those parts are exhausting,
Oh
and
yeah.
you can drain your own energy, and you can stress yourself out and pop yourself up into sympathetic mode, and just buzz around and not realize that what you're doing is you're trying to avoid that feeling. You're trying to run away from whatever it is. But your true self knows that, hey, I can feel this feeling, and it's not
Mhm.
going to kill me.
Yeah.
Because
I
I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not 6 years old or 5 years old or 3 years old. It's like those little kid parts of you don't realize that, hey, I'm an adult. I actually have an adult self who, pays bills and can drive a car and do all
Yeah.
these adult things. And I also have an adult self who is capable and can feel this feeling, and it's not scary. And it's the same as a parent. I sit with my little kid and I say, gosh, this feeling is so big and it feels so bad. And we sit and we feel it. And man, kids are so resilient. He's like ready to bounce back after 10 seconds of feeling it. It's like, yeah, or 30 seconds or a minute. And it's like, yeah, okay, let's play cars.
Yes. Yeah. IFS is such a beautiful modality and way for us to find compassion,
Mm,
because if we can look at our experience as just like a summation of all of these parts that are coming in and coming out, it gives it reduces the shame and embarrassment about what we're feeling in that moment.
yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm having a really anxious part that's sort of taking the wheel right now. And
Hmm.
the analogy that I use with my clients is, imagine you're driving a school bus, and when you're in your self energy, all of your parts are really trusting you to drive, and you're driving down the road, and then something happens and one of the parts is like, no, I need to take the wheel because I don't trust you to figure this out. So the anxiety part or the sadness part or the whatever part comes forward and jumps on your lap and takes the wheel and jars you to the left off a cliff, and you're like, whoa. So it takes awareness of and separation from that part to
Hmm.
be able to understand what that part actually needs. But when we're in the part, we're really enmeshed and we can't reparent that part. We can't give that part any sort of love or understanding or compassion because we are just like as one with it. So we have to have tools to be able to regulate the nervous system to a point where we can say, this is a part of me that's feeling this thing. And I feel this part in my body. This is a very familiar part. This is, a part that's 5 years old. And we can get really curious and specific around what those parts look like. And it really helps to make healing feel more doable, other than just like get over it. It's like,
Right.
oh, now I know that this part's coming forward, and every time this part comes forward, this is what this part needs to hear. And I
Yeah.
just need to take a moment from the emails and from the filling of my calendar and from the binging Netflix to turn towards this feeling and let myself be with it, because I know how to do that now, and I know how to comfort that part of me.
Yeah. And I think it helps with the like the having the compassion for yourself and just making sense of, why do I keep doing this behavior that I don't agree with? I think it's, maybe I have judgment on that part, even that
Yeah.
why do you keep driving off the cliff? Why do you keep oversleeping or uh, mouthing off or in a situation where it's not going to make it better, or whatever it is. And it's like when you say, oh, this is a part of me, and that part is really scared. It reminds me of the Elizabeth Gilbert, the author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love is her most famous, but I love the book she wrote, Big Magic.
Uh-huh.
It's just all about connecting with the big magic in life. And she, as a writer, she talked about, she has a lot of fear when she starts writing that her book's gonna be awful. And she just says, okay, you can be with me in the car, but you
Yep.
can't drive. I'm driving this car. And so I'm going to keep writing, but you can sit here and we can talk a little bit. And I read that book way before I knew about parts therapy. And I love that, just acceptance of this fear, because
Mhm.
all these parts of ourselves have an important thing to say to us. The
Yeah.
part, as I go back and look through the parts of me that I did not listen to, and my toxic marriage, it was the same parts that as a child I wasn't allowed to have a voice.
Yeah.
There were all these things that I couldn't say and only things that I could say. So those parts of me got squished and quieted so young. So then it's like, well, I can have compassion on myself, why I chose a partner who treated me bad,
Yeah.
didn't know how to treat, doesn't really know how to treat better, and doesn't know how to get help himself. It makes sense. And it
Yeah.
becomes that much easier to validate those parts of ourselves and then have compassion
Yep.
and then heal when you're not swimming in the emotion. I think
Yeah.
that's a really good way to put it. Waste.
We can so easily jump to that critical voice, that judgment that's like, I shouldn't be feeling this. I'm 35, 45, 55 years old. Like, I shouldn't be having these fears. These are irrational. And we just berate ourselves for having these feelings
Hmm.
when that's not offering any sort of healing. Compassion leads to healing. Judgment just leads to stagnation or being stuck in that belief or that fear. But all of these parts of us came online at very specific points in our life when they had to create a solution because nobody was coming to help them. Nobody was comforting them. Nobody was telling them that they are perfect exactly the way that they are. So they've all created these maladaptive solutions to problems.
Hmm.
And so when the problem happens in our now, in our adult life, that part is like, I have the solution. I know that it's not safe to use our voice, so I'm going to just squash that down. And then that's better than using our voice and rocking the boat and being unsafe.
Hmm.
Even though this might be happening in a healthy relationship that you're in now, right? And that part of you might be still operating from the abusive relationship from your childhood.
Yeah.
So they just don't know. These parts don't know that we've grown up. They don't know that they don't have to be the one to take to be the parent. They need someone to come in and be like, "Honey, I see you. I know
Hmm.
this is your solution, and I have so many new solutions. We're going to use one of these solutions. Watch how cool this solution is."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love my particular therapist. I don't know a ton about how other people practice parts therapy. I've talked a little bit, but I guess there's all kinds of different ways, and there's a lot of room for kind of creativity. But one thing I really love is that when we work with a part, we always start with a protector and say, okay, well, what is, hi, protector, could you just take a seat for a minute
Yeah.
and let the self come in, or with the little one, and we feel the feeling. We go, what do you need?
Mhm.
And then at the end, once we've felt the feeling and integrated it, and hopefully, at the end we say, she leads me, she kind of has led me through this a lot. We say to the protector sometimes, would you like to do a different job? Like, we don't, the self is here. I don't need you to distract me, or we don't have to disassociate because now we've got this, and look at, so what would you like to do? And so I think I love this because it's so creative and weird. 'Cause you're just like, but you're sitting and you're listening to yourself, and you're just listening to the parts of you that want to do something different. And like most of the time, my protector's exhausted. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I have been doing this for years, years and years and years, and nobody listens to me. And and
Yeah.
it's always this energy that's just like, oh my God, it's too much. And then we're like, chill out. Can you sit down? I've got this. And then would come back and say, would you like to do something else? And sometimes it's like been like, yeah, I'd love to paint. And
Mhm.
so like so as a exercise and trusting myself, and learn, I paint, or I want to sing. So every day I just make sure there's some song, and I'm in, whether I'm in the car or house or wherever I am, that I can just sing it out. And
Yeah.
it's just like ways to like engage those childlike parts of you that got squished or became really busy protecting you and not being a child. All those things as an adult still feel really good. I
Yeah.
love to paint, and I love to get messy, or I'm going to sing, or I'm going to be really playful. And maybe that's playing with my kids if in a really silly way, or making up a song, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's like, oh, I kind of really want to read this poem, or
Mhm.
whatever
Yeah.
it is, because I think sometimes when we say self-care, it's like, oh, I've got to put on a face mask or paint my nails, even if it's not someone who likes to do that, or I've got to sit in the bathtub with wine, even if maybe drinking's not a great idea for me right now.
Yeah.
Like, we have this pressure of self-care, and it's just like, man, it's just taking those moments, and you listen. And I love having a therapist that works me through this, because it's hard for me still to
Yeah.
sit down and do that on my own regularly. And then it's just like, I feel empowered. I feel more in touch with myself. I feel more myself as a I keep thinking about the mom that I was as a new mom. It's so hard to be a new mom. And there's a lot of dialogue a lot about that. Lots of women, lots of moms speaking up, changing the narrative of being a selfless mom. And
Mhm.
I was a complete martyr, selfless mom for such a long time. And that's what was modeled to me. And my mom is fantastic, and I love her, and she's just such a great woman. But I just knew, I grew up knowing selfless mom, that when you're my mom, that's you become selfless. I didn't have children till I was older, because I didn't want to be selfless. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do other things. And now it's the opposite. It's be a self-full mom. Be full of yourself and all the things that make up yourself. It's all the things that feel really good. We all want to feel free, and we all want to feel joy, and we all want to feel peace. We want excitement. We want no drama. We want, there's all these different things at different, just day to day, that we want. And if you're not listening to yourself, and you're not filling up with yourself, then you don't have anything to offer. Like you talked about your cup being full, and if your cup is empty, you have the bare bones of a person to offer, and that's not fulfilling as a child to receive that as a friend, like
Yeah.
I remember being when I was in my toxic relationship and just in the thick of it, and it was so hard, but I didn't want to talk about the hard. I wasn't very honest about everything because if I said things out loud to my friends, I would have to maybe
Yeah.
be held accountable to like, well, what are you going to do? That's not okay, Taj. That's I would have heard that. And so I was purposely very, a lot of vague and a lot of whatever. But I remember I just would talk and chat every chance I got because in part, and I thought, oh, it's because I'm at home and I'm a mom and I don't have the outlet. But when I look back, I was like, I needed like substance. I needed a therapist. Or a life coach. I needed somebody where I could come and who was just supporting me. And that's what I always tell people if they're asking me like therapy or what is it good? You always talk about it. It's good. I'm like, man, yes, I pay her, but I have this person in my corner always.
Yeah.
And she will be on, if I say something that's just, a little bonkers, she's going to, let's be curious about that. So she's still holding me to what I'm saying, but in a very gentle way. But no matter what, she is there to support my growth, help me learn to support my body. And I think that is that is a huge necessary thing. You need someone who can be in your corner
Yeah.
without and I know a lot of people have relationships where they're like, yeah, I can talk to this person or that person, but they're not really in your corner
It's
because
not the
maybe they
same.
got their own stuff.
Yeah. Well, the energy is that I don't have to take care of my therapist. I
Yeah.
can just show up and be held, be taken care of, be nurtured, be heard, be listened to, like all of these things where in a friendship, even a healthy friendship, there's a give and take. I share a little bit and then I want to hear about you. But in the therapist or the coach relationship, like a good therapist or coach, it's about you. And we, as the provider, the practitioner, are there to help you find clarity about you in a very gentle, non-judgmental way. So for women specifically who don't know how to receive, therapy and coaching can be really hard because that is a relationship where you are just receiving. You are just the one who doesn't have to rescue, doesn't have to put your needs last.
Mm-hmm.
So it can feel a little bit scary to even take up space in that type of situation.
Yeah, I think that's big. It is so hard to take up space, even if you know it. Like I know it that I'm
Yeah.
supposed to take up space and that I'm allowed to, but it's different than giving myself permission and actually doing it
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. This just happened to me the other night with my partner where I went to bed before him and he was reading out in the other room and I was having a lot of anxiety just like hit me out of the blue and some insomnia and I like couldn't sleep and I was fighting myself and asking for him to come and comfort me or come and be with me, help me co-regulate. I was like, no, I need to do this myself. I don't want to take up space, right? And this is all like childhood stuff that was
Right.
not even consciously that I was thinking of consciously, but it was really preventing me from taking the action of being like, can you actually come here? I need a hug or whatever I needed from him in that moment. But we're so programmed, especially as women, that we are the ones giving. We're not the ones taking. We don't need to take up space. We don't need to have needs, right? And it's such a disservice to us as women and to the people that we are in relationship with. Because to your point about the filling of the cup and being full of yourself so that you can give yourself to other people, we're really robbing the people that we're in relationship with if we are functioning on a level that's depleted all of the time because
Mm-hmm.
they're not getting to experience the authentic us. They're not getting to experience our self energy, that playful, creative, calm, confident person. They're experiencing the burnt out part of us that's operating out of survival, which
Yes.
is not good for us or them. That's not like there's no beneficial outcome there,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to get familiar with the part of us that thinks that they're doing the right thing, that thinks that being burnt out is the solution because of whatever wounding comes from is creating that.
Right. I saw I love TikTok. I love TikTok more than Netflix. And it's kind of a problem. But I saw this video where this woman, she did such a fantastic job of showing she's a mom, and she dressed a part of like each hat that she wears as a mom and a woman, as a wife and friend and just a person. And so they're each talking to each other like, okay, what have we got going on? We've got the planner, we've got the mom that has to coordinate everything, we've got the mom who's going to cook the food, and we've got the mom that's getting the kids, well, we've got the wife. And then, mom that's like, well, okay, self-care, we need to put that in. And the whole point was that none of the other of herselves recognized that that was even important. And it was like, you're last, basically. And I saw that and I was like, gosh, that's so spot on. Not just as a mom, but as a woman and a person. I think that way. And I had seen it and I thought about it. And then I think it was the next week in therapy, and we're talking, my therapist, we did parts work, and we go and we're talking, and I'm saying all this. And she was like, I hear all these shoulds. Like, what you're saying, you're conflicted about, you should do because for this person and for this person. So, but what about you? You're rescuing them. Why don't you rescue yourself here? What does
Mhm.
yourself really want? And that just hit me. I mean, it was like, I felt like I got punched in the gut. It was just like, whoa. And it's like in that moment, I could see years of me rescuing everyone else. And
Yeah.
myself comes last. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you're tired. And I don't have the energy or the capacity to rescue myself anymore. At a certain point in the night, all of that shuts off. And I really thought about that. And it mirrored a really important theme for me that I realized in my marriage. I was cheated on, I was treated poorly, I was abused, and I still kept, what can I do? What can I do? And it took me a while to forgive and myself and have compassion and realize like I was surviving, and I had to do these things to survive, and I don't have to judge myself for that. But I also, in my most recent relationship, there were some aspects where he did not protect my love like I wanted him to, and like he should have. And I thought, I'm like thinking of that relationship and thinking of my marriage and thinking just in general, like and I said this to a friend. I said, I am so loyal. I am so loyal. I deserve someone who is that loyal to me. And she said, can you be loyal to yourself?
Oh,
Like,
yes.
boom. Yes, I can. It's going to take a little while, but the idea that when you say no to yourself for somebody else, you're being loyal to them.
Yeah.
And that means you're quieting yourself.
Yeah.
You're not
Yes.
rescuing yourself. You're
Yep.
shoulding.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be, like even, I think even in my toxic marriage, I think there was a part of him that could go, I don't like this. I don't like that Tosh shoulds everywhere and rescues everywhere. I wish she'd kind of choose herself sometimes. Of course, then there was other parts of him that was like, you can't choose yourself. You've got to choose me.
Yeah.
But I think even someone who was like mentally unhealthy could recognize that that's not a good way to be in someone else. And yeah, that's what I'm transitioning to in my thinking, even, is how do I rescue myself? If I catch myself shooting, then I know I'm not paying attention to a part of me. And there's a part of me that is the reason you feel torn when you're shooting is because you know that what's best for there is a part of you that knows that what's best for you is not what you're about to do.
Yes.
And Dr. Becky, who I love, obviously, I'm going to reference her again. She said, I get to have things in my life, even if it inconveniences others, even if they don't like it. Whether that's my kid, she uses the examples of if it's my kid, I get to decide what we're having for dinner and it's something I like and they can deal with it. That's
Yeah.
part of life, is learning how to deal with disappointment.
Yep.
Or if it's I'm going to take space for me and my partner wants space for him or her, I get to take it for me right now. And
Yeah.
I deserve that and I will claim it. And a person who's doing that regularly, they have space for someone else. They
Yeah.
have a clear space because it's clearly lined with boundaries. This is your space that you get to occupy. You don't get to,
Yeah.
there is a certain point where you don't get to go.
Yeah.
And that breeds a healthier, more intimate connection than
Yeah.
having wishy-washy boundaries and just getting walked all over and being that selfless, like
Yeah.
shell of a person or mom.
Yeah.
or wife or partner, whatever relationship you're talking about.
Yeah, because one of the biggest kickers of what you just said is if we aren't loyal to ourselves, if we aren't respecting ourselves, if we aren't choosing ourselves, if we aren't making time for ourselves, we are going to continue to attract the people who do the same thing, who aren't loyal, who aren't choosing us, who aren't respecting us, who don't love us, who don't make time for us,
Mhm.
because our internal belief has to match our external circumstance.
Yeah.
So if I don't believe that I am worthy of time to myself, right? I'm not going to attract the guy who's like, "Honey, take some time. You deserve this." Or I'm going to fight it. And then that's going to cause friction in the relationship and then the relationship is going to unravel. So to attract a healthy partnership, you have to create the healthy relationship with yourself
Mhm.
first. That has to be the foundation because those internal beliefs are going to drive your behavior, they're going to drive your choices, and you
Yes.
are going to keep spinning in that burnt out, rescuing, attracting emotionally unavailable people, and it's
Yep.
not going to be fulfilling. And the good news is for any woman listening who's like, shit, I am the rescuer. I rescue everybody. I take
Mhm.
care of everybody. The good news is you have that skill. You already know how to do it. So you just need to redirect who you're doing it to. You just need to turn that energy into how can I take care of myself the way that I would take care of my best friend in this situation, the way that I would take care of my kid in this situation.
For me, one aspect that's a common denominator in my relationships is that something I learned in childhood, which was to not be truthful about what's really happening. Not say, whoa, this is a problem. I do not morally or ethically or on any level agree with what is happening. I couldn't say that as a child when my dad was, talking bad about to my mom. I couldn't step in and say that. It was terrifying. He was had a very intimidating, terrifying presence, especially to a little kid. And I learned not to speak up. And so I learned to just ignore and kind of gloss over those flags. So guess what I've done in all my relationships?
Yeah.
I've glossed over the red flags and I've justified them. And I know that's a lot of people do that, but I have to be able to tell myself the truth, even when it hurts. And even when it means, well, I might not get to play with a shiny toy. if,
Yeah.
if I'm truthful, I might
Yeah.
not get to have the good of this relationship if I'm really honest about what's happening. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what you said. I think is exactly spot on. When people say, "Oh, I keep repeating it. Why do I keep attracting a man that lies to me?" Well, let's look at that. Let's be curious about why that is. And when I was curious about it with my therapist, we discovered that, well, I lie to myself.
Yeah.
And even though that sounds kind of harsh, it actually is very empowering and freeing because it's like, oh, well, that is, honesty is a big value of mine. I want to grow in that and I can grow in that. And it's a lot of I cans instead of why does this keep happening to me
Yeah.
or I keep attracting the same person. It's like you can choose to find fault and use judgment and say, oh, I'm a bad person or I have bad luck with men or men are crap or whatever.
Yep.
But the truth is I know how to be honest in a lot of ways and I can say hard truths. I can do that more. I can learn that more. I can dig a little deeper. I can do that. It's
Mhm.
very doable.
It's all skills. We're just learning new skills, right? We've been
Right.
operating with one toolbox and now we're learning how to use our new tools.
Yeah.
And that's having the clarity is the first step to being able to recognize these tools aren't working anymore. And I've been doing this for 30 years and now I need to learn something new.
Mhm.
And we resist the learning curve part. We
That's
resist,
uncomfortable.
yeah, of course. Of course. Of all the things that we've kind of touched on, what would be the one takeaway that you really want women to hear who are maybe in a relationship that they know on some level that they shouldn't be in or are being mistreated? What do you want them to know?
And I want them to know that you might feel like you are locked down in a cage, but that cage is not what it seems. You have the tools right now to break out. That doesn't mean right this second blow up your life. Leaving a toxic relationship can be very scary. It is scary. It can also be very dangerous. So talk to people that you trust, make a plan, and find a way out. It's scary when you feel like there are so many uncertainties, but it is really beautiful to watch it unravel. Like when I look back, and if I were to tell this really specifics of my story, it's just what it needed to be.
Mhm.
And there were moments that were super hard and where I just was overcome with different feelings. But what we know about feelings is that they are temporary. You can have a really, really huge feeling and it feels like that will consume you. And it might consume you, but those feelings only consume us if we really feel them for 10 seconds, 30 seconds. You know, when you're building up and you need to have a big cry and you finally let it loose, you don't cry for days. I mean, even in extreme grief, we don't cry nonstop for days. We cry in spurts. We have feelings in spurts, and that's okay. And they're all temporary. And you know, the sun's going to come up, the sun's going to go down. We're going to have morning, we're going to have afternoon, we're going to have night. You will make it one moment to the next, no matter what's happening. Look what you're already making it through. Maybe you're being hit, or maybe you're degraded in every way. There's all kinds of ways that we're treated poorly. You're already enduring it. What if you just endure some hard to get on the other side? Is
Yeah,
it
a
is
different type of
so
hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of hard, oh man, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
It's so worth it. 3, 4 years ago, I thought I could not imagine my life without that relationship and in what felt like safety. It was a misnomer. That was not safe. It was not safe in any way for me, but it was familiar and it felt like it was safe. But little by little, I have all the things that I wanted, that I thought, oh, I won't have enough support with my kid. I won't have enough support with my heart. Can I do it financially? Can I do it? It's it's all, I have all of that. And not because I'm some special person. I am just a person, and the world is unraveling for all of us. It is moving so that we can have the things that we want, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
I had I've lived in this house for 5 years this month or next month. And the whole time there's this rose bush that's been out back. And I just thought, oh, it was hanging in there, but not really doing anything. I never saw it bloom. And I've lived here 5 years. I lived here during a toxic relationship. And the whole time I was getting out of it, I lived here. And this spring it bloomed for the first time. And
Ah,
it's these beautiful tea roses. They're pink and they have the tea roses are the kind that have the tons of petals and they smell delicious. And I thought, yes, I made I had to cut off, I had to trim off the toxic things that were choking me in
yeah.
every way. I trimmed that off. I watered, let nature do its thing. And some years you get to bloom. And finally I get to bloom. My rose bush gets to bloom. And it's such a metaphor for the transformation back to life, because I was dying. And
Yeah.
now I'm coming back to life. And so if you're still in the dying part where you know that your relationship is, deadly and fatal in one way or another, or all the ways, maybe it won't always feel like that.
Oh, so well said. Thank you. Thank you for that message. At the end of these episodes, I also pull an oracle card to offer a message to the listeners. Are you familiar with oracle cards?
A little bit.
Okay. So I always ask the guests to help me choose a card on behalf of the listeners. We shuffle and we see which one comes out, or we see which one you feel we should stop on, and then I'll read from the book what the message is.
Okay.
And listeners can take it, they can leave it, they can see how it resonates. Maybe it sparks a new train of thinking. It's just a way to sort of help you anchor in your growth for this week.
Okay.
So go ahead and close your eyes for me, and just start by taking a deep breath into the body. I'm going to start to shuffle the deck. We're just going to ask the deck, what is the message that is intended for all of the women listening today? And whenever you feel like the shuffle is complete, just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. So we got pick up your mess.
No.
which for those of you not watching the video, it looks like a messy bedroom,
Mhm.
maybe, I think. It's a little abstract, but regardless, let me find the message in the book here and I'll read it out loud. Pick up your mess shows you when it's time to own your shit. Take responsibility and clean up your mess. Repair your mistakes. Apologize. Personal accountability is the pathway to healing and freedom. No need to judge yourself for making a mess in the first place. Life is messy. You're not a bad person because you got it wrong, misunderstood, or made a mistake. Pick up your mess provides the opportunity to find lost treasures, to repair what was broken, to reconnect to things that are hidden in the clutter. Chop, chop, it's time to get started, one little piece at a time.
No, I
Love it.
like that.
Love it. Yeah, it's exactly what we talked about.
Yeah, chop chop.
As always. Well, Taj, thank you so much again for sharing your story and your wisdom and your insight. I hope that the women listening can something landed for them as like a gem from this episode that I get feedback all of the time from clients that come in from the podcast or just people who write in that are like, your guests are amazing. And just listening to their vulnerability makes me feel more strong, like I can do it too.
Mhm.
So this means more than you will know, most likely, and how it's going to impact all the women listening. So thank you, thank
Oh,
you.
I hope so. I hope we're all, we all need that connection and to hear that we're not alone.
Yeah,
That means everything.
so good. Well,
Thank you,
until
Bree.
next time. All right, I'm going to stop recording.